There's a special kind of disaster that only Hollywood can create. A movie so bafflingly bad, so painfully misguided, that it feels like watching your childhood get set on fire in real time. And somehow, Disney has managed to do just that with their upcoming live-action Snow White remake. Now, we've seen Disney fumble before, The Little Mermaid, The Marvels, but this is something different. This is a studio, already struggling to regain audience trust, taking one of their most beloved films and systematically tearing it apart piece by piece. And at the center of it all, the actress who somehow made it her personal mission to turn people against her own movie before it even released. From mocking the original film to making arrogant, dismissive comments about Disney fans, to the studio's baffling creative choices that made this movie unrecognizable. Snow White isn't just another Disney misstep. It's a full-blown catastrophe. So, how did we get here? How did one actress and a series of mind-boggling decisions manage to turn a classic into one of Disney's biggest disasters? Let's break it down. Let's start with the biggest problem. Rachel Zegler. Disney's Snow White remake was already controversial, but Zegler made it 100 times worse. Instead of showing even the slightest bit of respect for the original 1937 animated classic, she openly mocked it in interviews. She called the love story weird and creepy, dismissed the prince as a stalker, and bragged about how her version of Snow White wasn't dreaming of love. She was dreaming of leadership. Look, there's nothing wrong with updating a story. But when the lead actress actively insults the original film and its fans, that's not a good look. And Disney chose this person to be the face of their film. Then there's the hypocrisy. In one breath, Zegler claims she loves Disney, that she grew up at the theme parks. Then, in the next, she admits she was terrified of the original Snow White and only watched it once as a kid. So which is it? Did she love it, or did she hate it? It's almost like she just says whatever she thinks will make her look good at the moment. And then, of course, there's the political drama. Zegler has been vocal about her support for the Free Palestine movement, while her co-star, Gal Gadot, is an Israeli actress and former IDF soldier. That's an awkward situation, to say the least. And it's no surprise that Disney has barely put them in the same room together for promotion. But Zegler wasn't the only problem with this movie. Oh no, Disney made plenty of other baffling decisions along the way. Let's talk about the dwarfs. Or should I say, the creepy CGI nightmare creatures? At first, Disney tried to be progressive by removing the 7 dwarfs entirely, thanks to actor Peter Dinklage calling them offensive stereotypes. Instead, they replaced them with diverse magical creatures, which was already a ridiculous move. But then, after Backlash, they tried to course-correct by sort of bringing the dwarfs back. The final result? Some hideous, uncanny valley monstrosities that look like they crawled out of a failed Lord of the Rings spin-off. This wasn't about modernizing the story. It was about bending over backward to avoid offending people who probably weren't even going to watch the movie in the first place. Then there's the fact that Disney seems to have given up on marketing this movie entirely. The original budget was reportedly around $300 million, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the promotional efforts. Usually, Disney goes all in on their live-action remakes. Look at The Little Mermaid. Whether people liked it or not, there were posters, trailers, merchandise, and constant promotion. But Snow White? Nothing. The premiere has been scaled back massively, with no major red carpet event, barely any press, and hardly any hype. It's like Disney knows this movie is going to bomb and just wants to get it over with. Perhaps the biggest insult of all is that this movie doesn't even feel like Snow White. The iconic prince? All of his scenes were cut. The love story? Completely removed. The original dwarfs? Replaced. Snow White's core personality? Rewritten into a strong, independent leader who has no time for fairy tale romance. At this point, why even call it Snow White? Disney could have just made an entirely new fantasy movie and saved themselves the backlash. Instead, they took a beloved classic, stripped out everything that made it special, and expected audiences to be excited about it. So what happens next? Well, unless some miraculous turnaround happens, which is highly unlikely, Disney's Snow White is heading straight for disaster. And honestly, the signs couldn't be clearer. Let's be real here, this movie is going to bomb. The early box office projections are already abysmal. And it's not just because of the controversies surrounding Rachel Zegler or the baffling creative decisions. It's because there's zero excitement for this film. There's no nostalgia factor. The original Snow White is one of the most beloved animated films of all time. But instead of honoring that, Disney has completely rewritten it, alienating longtime fans in the process. There's no compelling new vision. Some remakes at least bring something visually impressive to the table, The Jungle Book, for example. But everything we've seen from this film, from the lifeless set photos to the horrifying CGI dwarfs, just screams uninspired. There's no audience demand. Disney's past live-action remakes, despite their flaws, still had some excitement around them. But Snow White, if anything, people are actively rooting for it to fail. And speaking of failure, let's talk about Disney's absolute lack of faith in this movie. One of the biggest red flags. Disney is barely promoting it. Think about it. When was the last time a Disney live-action remake wasn't pushed with massive marketing campaigns, merchandise tie-ins, and endless TV spots? Even The Little Mermaid, which also had its fair share of backlash, was promoted like crazy. Yet Snow White, no big merchandise push, no massive ad campaigns, no high-profile celebrity interviews, or at least, none that aren't disasters. And now, the premiere itself has been downgraded to a glorified screening in the middle of the afternoon. That's not the behavior of a company that believes in its movie. That's the behavior of a studio that knows it has a disaster on its hands and is just trying to cut its losses. And honestly, this might be Disney's worst-performing remake yet. Because while some of their other live-action films have been bad, Snow White doesn't just have bad marketing or questionable creative choices. It's actively antagonized its own audience. Let's be real, this isn't just about Snow White. This is part of a much bigger trend. For years, Disney has been on a downward spiral, prioritizing agenda-driven storytelling over good storytelling. They're not making movies that people want to see. They're making movies designed to lecture their audience while stripping away the magic that made Disney Disney in the first place. And it's not just the fans who are noticing. Even the box office numbers are proving it. The Marvels bombed. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny bombed. Strange World bombed. The Little Mermaid underperformed internationally and lost money despite a strong domestic run. And now, Snow White is next in line for the chopping block. At what point does Disney realize that maybe, just maybe, they should stop insulting their own fanbase? At what point do they stop turning beloved classics into soulless cash grabs with forced modern messaging? At what point do they learn that respecting your audience is how you win them back? Because at the rate they're going, they're not just losing money. They're losing trust. They're losing goodwill. And worst of all, they're losing their identity. Here's the big question. Will this be the flop that finally wakes Disney up? After so many failures, you'd think they'd start rethinking their approach. But knowing Disney? Probably not. They'll blame the fans, call criticism toxic, and keep doubling down on the same bad decisions. But hey, what do you think? Will Snow White be Disney's biggest flop yet? Is there any way to save their live-action remakes at this point? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.